What's up, folks? Welcome back inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. That is Tim May, the 40-year vet. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Let's do a practice report driven by Byers Auto, the best place to buy a new or used auto in Columbus, Ohio, and Central Ohio. Tim, shall we?
I'm ready, willing, and able.
All right, let's talk. Okay, so a couple safeties met with on the field out here after practice, Tim. Ronnie Hickman, we talked to Josh Proctor. We talked to some corners, not Denzel Burke, Cameron Brown. We talked to J.K. Johnson and Jair Brown. Then we also had Matthew Jones. A lot of guys to talk to, Tim. Bottom line is a lot of talent on the field tonight, a lot of folks to talk to, a lot of information to soak up. What did you learn?
Well, number one, we talked to we talked to two of the three starting safeties, and we talked to the two starting cornerbacks from last week. That's number one, which is interesting to get a pure freshman out here and Jair Brown. But as I asked JK as the conversation was going on with everybody, so do you think you're going to start this week? And he wasn't, sure. I said, have you been working with the ones? He got a big smile on his face. Yes. So, who knows? That's going to be an interesting deal because I'm sure they're going to put that off until at least maybe Friday because, like we talked about with Denzel Burke, whatever happened with his hand, he had surgery on it last week, and there was a chance he was going to play with a club on.
He had
club
on.
Club is the wrong term. Big pad on. Probably use it as a club. But the bottom line was he kind of finally got ruled out because, why? You could just, you could just see where that could go, right? But now you've got two guys who have started, and in my opinion, and even in the opinion of Ryan Day and Tim Walton, they played well last week.
They did.
Even that one pass, you heard me get clarification from Tim Walton about that one pass down the right sideline there just before halftime. J.K. Johnson was over there, but he was dropped into a zone, and that guy kind of didn't check up like everybody thought he would. The receiver ran down the sideline, and Wisconsin took a shot. Lo and behold, here comes Tanner McAllister, almost out of nowhere, and breaks the ball. One of the great plays you've ever seen. Even Ronnie Rocket Hickman was talking about it a little while ago about what a fantastic play that was, and he's right. That kept Wisconsin from having any hope. Really, when you look at it,
absolutely,
the rest of that game. So that's kind of what you learned is I think confidence is high in these two young corners, and Ronnie Hickman and Josh Proctor, or as I think it was J.K. Johnson referred to him. No, maybe it was Jair Brown. But anyway, no, Josh Proctor, or Jair Brown referred to him as Proc and Rocket. I went a long way. If that was a comedy routine, I just screwed it all up. But Proc and the Rocket, I go, man. Talk about putting them in your pocket.
Well, we're absolutely not a comedy routine, Tim.
I wasn't on that one. That was a bumbling, stumbling, rumbling.
Maybe the Friday video, bold predictions with 4 downs, might be a comedy video, but this one certainly is. This is a practice report presented by Byers Auto. And what I learned, Tim, as I talked to Tehran Vincent, one of the stars of the night out here, defensive tackle, senior, guy who's been through the ringer to get to where he's at now. Tehran Vincent is playing at a level I don't think a lot of people really recognize. I think one of the things that's happened to Tehran is Mike Hall is so quick off the ball and he gets to the backfield. He's about a half step quicker than Tehran Vincent is when it comes to making a play. And so Mike Hall will make the play, but if you watch every play that Mike Hall's in on, Tehran Vincent's only about half a step behind him. And if Mike Hall didn't make the play, Tehran would have.
Yeah.
And so, tackles for loss and sacks aren't always telling the entire story. And Tehran Vincent's playing at an extremely high level right now, folks. And I continue to be impressed with his play. He's finally healthy for a long period of time. He's finally settling into a role, which he couldn't do because of those health issues for the last few years. And you're seeing the fruits of that labor that he's put in the last few years now start to shine. And in a defensive line with all those stars and all the guys who everyone wants to talk about, I asked Tehran plain and simple, do you like being a little bit of underrated, not talked about, in the weeds kind of guy? And he said, absolutely. Yeah, I just go out there and do my job. And it says a lot about a senior who could be asking for the limelight to be that way and be a little selfless through 4 games for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, and I asked him also if, did his dad do much talking after the game? And he said no, because, his dad, Troy Vincent, was played for the Wisconsin Badgers way back when. I even did a couple stories on him way back when. That's how long I've been around.
40-year vet?
And bottom line was he goes, no, he didn't do, he pretty much kept quiet because we all saw that video that his dad posted the day before the game wearing a jersey that was cut down the middle, half and half Buckeyes, half Wisconsin. But you could tell that his sentiments his sentiment was with Wisconsin because that's where he bled. That's where he dropped blood, was on that field up there and stuff. But it's really cool to see him, the way he's progressed, Tehran Vincent this year, feeling totally healthy now, just what a different player he is. And on top of that, fans have to keep in mind when you're watching defensive line play, from one play to the next, and I was asking Tehran about this too, from one play to the next, Tehran Vincent may have one gap responsibility, which means he can just get into that gap and go. And he also, the next play, may have two gap responsibility, which means he's basically trying to create a stalemate with the guy, with the offensive lineman in front of him and playing the gap on either side of him. In other words, he's responsible for those two gaps. And those things can change from play to play, et cetera. And so you can't necessarily judge players just on what, the production is showing. And like he was talking about, his play has helped, and everybody can see it, has helped spring one of the really rocket ship stories this year in Tommy Eichenberg.
Yeah.
Has really helped spring him, kept guys off of him, et cetera. He's leading the team in tackles. And like the other night, I think he had 14 against Wisconsin. And Tehran basically said he helped him with 11 of those. And I said, yeah, too bad this isn't like hockey where you get an assist. But yes, I think Tehran is playing finally on a level that's big time, that goes along with that high recruiting ranking he had coming in years ago.
So Tim, here's a question for you, and just a quick answer, one word answer here. Which line is playing with more confidence right now? This defensive line, or the offensive line Matt Jones was talking about over here in the middle? As they've not allowed a sack in the last 2 games, didn't allow a tackle for loss against a Wisconsin team that hangs its hat on doing so. Which of those lines is playing better right now?
Well, number one, the premise is a one-word answer, but is defensive line or offensive line? That's 2 words.
Well, a defensive or offensive?
I'm going to go with the offensive line, only because, that's all I can say. You want me to explain?
I was about to ask, why?
I just like the way this group is playing exactly like we thought it would in preseason.
Yep.
Exactly like we thought it would last spring. It looks like an offensive line when they line up. It looks like they've got 2 really good guards, Matt Jones and Donovan Jackson. In my opinion, all Big Ten center, and Luke Whippler, maybe even better than that, the way he's playing. And obviously he's been dealing with a little bit of pain these last several games, in that ankle area. And then, of course, their 2 tackles, I think, are getting better by the minute, DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson Jr. I really like the way both of those guys are playing in different ways. But I keep going back to 74, Donovan Jackson. I just think this guy, by the end of the year, has All-American written on him. If people are really paying attention to guard play, the way he can pull and get to the edge, for example, is really stunning, and it's fun to watch. Let's put it that way. But I think all 5 of those guys are playing extremely well, and I don't think that's hyperbole. Just look at the total offense.
Tim, one of the most interesting storylines of this week has been a lack thereof throughout this week. Now that we're done with media for the most part, we've got Ryan Day a little bit on Thursday morning, but we've talked to Ryan Day, we talked to Tim Walton, the cornerbacks coach, we talked to Mitch Rossi, the fullback, who's a team first guy, we all know that. We talked to a lot of guys out here tonight, not mentioning Rutgers, and not much unless they're asked about it.
Because, I asked about it.
So if you ask what sticks out about Rutgers, they all have something to say. They all have very nice things to say. I think a lot of these guys respect Greg Schiano because a lot of these guys were recruited by Greg Schiano to be here. When you talk about Ronnie Hickman, you talk about Josh Proctor. Both of those guys were recruited. Tehran Vincent was on the roster when we talked to him tonight when Greg Schiano was here for a year. So there's a lot of respect there. And they're willing to say good things about Rutgers. But at the same time, this team is so focused on itself. Last year, when they would focus on opponents, the Oregon game, you talk about the Michigan game, getting beyond themselves a little bit, I think. Now that we're beyond that point, we kind of reflect on that a little bit. This team this year is absolutely drilled in on one subject and one subject only, themselves. And I think that says a lot about a unit and a group and a club that comes into the year with such high expectations and can set those expectations to the side to know we need to be better for ourselves, not for the rankings, not for the standings, not for anything else, ourselves. And I think that the lack of the Rutgers storyline this week, it was a little bit with Wisconsin last week, they were focusing on themselves. The lack of talking about Rutgers this week really is starting to speak to me that this team is focused on one thing only.
Well, but you know what? these guys answer questions they're asked.
I understand that.
They're not going to come out here and start preaching about Rutgers. I'm going to tell you something. Rutgers has improved even from last year. They know it. They know that this team plays very tough defensively. It's very sound defensively if you watch them. That doesn't mean you're going to make every play, because they're still, like, as Greg Schiano pointed out after the game last week, that against Iowa, I mean, golly, they gave Iowa 2 touchdowns with their passing game. I mean, 2 pick sixes. Otherwise, it's almost a stalemate. Of course, going against Iowa, anyway, we'll talk about that later. My point is, yes, offensively, they got a ways to go to really get the skill people involved, and even up on the line to a certain extent to get the guys they want. With that said, Greg Schiano and his staff are doing a really good job of trying to rob Peter to pay Paul with trick plays, misdirection, just an overload in the middle of the field on the left side of the line or right side of the line. Just they're trying to find these little ways to give themselves some kind of an edge. And that's what, Rodney Hickman was talking about that when I was asking him about it. And Josh Proctor said the same thing. This is a team you've got to keep your eyes wide open every play.
Yep.
Because, a quick touchdown here and a quick touchdown there, and suddenly you got yourself a game that you weren't expecting. With that said, also, the defense has made teams have to resort almost to big plays. The Rutgers defense so far, I think this defense is much improved compared to 3 years ago. And I think anybody can see that. Am I picking Rutgers to win? No. But I am asking about them only because it's curious. This is the kind of game where you may be concentrating on yourself. But concentrating on yourself when you're looking in the mirror too much can take you off the ball. And I think Greg Schiano's probably counting on that a little bit. But no, nobody's picking Rutgers to win this game. But it could be a tougher, at least at the beginning, could be tougher than you think.
Yeah, Rutgers was
because they have been competitive.
Yeah, Rutgers was not a very good football team last year and gave Michigan everything they wanted up in the Big House in a 20-13 win. In a 20-13 game that Michigan ended up winning. So it's not like Ohio State can just sleepwalk into this game, but also, the Buckeyes know the talent they have on this roster. And Josh Proctor had a pretty good quote. He said Greg Schiano recruits dogs. They're tenacious. They don't quit.
That's dogs with a D-A-W-G-S. Dogs, get after it. How about them dogs?
Well, we're talking about the Bucks, not
Tenacious
the dogs.
D.
We're talking about the Bucks, not the dogs. The dogs are down in the South. That's the number 1 team in the country. This apparently is the number 3 team in the country, Tim, but I see it as right now the number 2 team in the country. That's a story for another time, I guess.
Yeah.
Ohio State will put that undefeated record, that number 3 ranking, on the line Saturday at 3:30 in the Horseshoe against Rutgers for the homecoming game. If you're coming down to the stadium, it's the homecoming game, the 100-year celebration of the Horseshoe. But for now, it's only Wednesday. There's a lot more preparation to go as Tim and I break this down for LettermenRow.com. Again, that's the 40-year vet, Tim May. I am just Spencer Holbrook, the 4-year guy here in the program. And yeah, from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, we'll see you guys on Saturday inside the Horseshoe for Ohio State and Rutgers.